the term number one has come up often and once again at the state capture inquiry, this time in relation to a multi-billion rand Transnet tender in 2014. Henk Bester, the former MD of Rail for Hatch Consultants, worked on that tender and has been on the stand the majority of the day. Michael Appel following proceedings for us. He joins us now live. So, Mike, who does Henk Bester say number one is?
So, it's one of three people. It's either former President Jacob Zuma, and he says as much. It's either President Jacob Zuma at the time. It's either Brian Molefe, who was heading up Transnet, or it was Anuj Singh, who was the CFO at Transnet. So let me just give the background to how we even get to this. So on the 19th of July 2013, Henk Bester, as part of Hatch Consultants, is looking to form part of Transnet's 16 million ton manganese expansion project. South Africa was looking to expand exports of manganese from 5.5 million tons to 16 million tons. It's a 27 billion rand project. There would be a phase one and a phase two. Lot of money going into this. So this is a crucial project. Hatch Consultants is busy getting the paperwork together. They have done work for Transnet before. And on the 19th of July, Mr. Bester gets a phone call from a Mr. Padiachi from PM Africa and a Mr. Reddy from DEC Consultants saying, listen, we know you're about to tender for this project. We are going to be your supplier development partners. Now, supplier development, or SD partner, is in terms of the transformation agenda in South Africa, 30% of your business needs to go to a local company, capacitate, skills development, skills transfer, that sort of thing. Now, it is strange for a number of reasons, because only people within Transnet had knowledge of this expansion project. So they have obviously got somebody on the inside feeding them information. Secondly, they say they want 50% as supplier development partners, which was out of the ordinary. And then when they have this meeting on the 19th of July, Bester says that they arrive, Mr. Padiachi and Reddy, and say, listen, number one wants us to be your SD partners. And he says, number one? And he says, which number one? And their answer to him is, you know who's number one.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting.
Yeah, of course. So Henk Bester worked on a multi-billion rand manganese expansion project for Transnet around 2013, right? Did it become apparent quickly that this was simply an opportunity for politically connected individuals to loot?
Certainly so. There has been scandalous testimony today just about how difficult it is for a global corporate like Hatch Consultants. Yes, Mr. Bester is a local man, but he was working, they're headquartered in Canada. So it's a global consulting firm that's looking to do business with Transnet. And they get started on the first phase of this manganese expansion project. They have refused to let Mr. Reddy and Mr. Padiachi in on their business deal in phase one. This caused a lot of problems. Anuj Singh, who said that these guys must be a part of this tender. So you have the CFO of Transnet dictating who should be the supplier development partners on their own tender. There's a massive conflict of interest here. There are delays in payment to Hatch Consultants. So they ask for a meeting with Anuj Singh. That happens at Melrose Arch. Except there's a surprise guest in one Saleem Essa, who has nothing to do with Transnet, but of course is a known Gupta associate. And this is what was asked of him about the relationship between Saleem Essa and Anuj Singh at that meeting. Listen in.
Now, what was your impression of Mr. Essa and Mr. Singh's relationship at this meeting?
It was the most bizarre introduction, I would say. You must also recall that this is the first time that I actually had the privilege to be with Mr. Singh in a meeting situation, because he was just a name that mentioned to us, and he was just a name thrown around. previously we were supposed to have a meeting with him, which Mr. Pita chaired, and he didn't even pitch. So, so I had for me in my head, it was an anticlimax because Mr. Singh was sitting there, as I said, very well dressed in a suit and tie, and Mr. Essa was controlling him, and he was sitting there as if he can, almost as if he can only talk to us when he's allowed to talk. It was very strange.
So the Guptas were never far from action, it seems. How often have we heard people brag that they were actually in power? What was Bester told about that?
This is horrendous. So in phase 2 of this manganese expansion project now, Mr. Reddy, one of the businessmen who initially approached Mr. Bester when he was trying to get on phase 1, he calls for a meeting with Mr. Bester, and Saleem Essa is there again. And at this particular meeting, Saleem Essa, who once again has got nothing to do with Transnet, says to him, you are going to make me and my company as Saleem Essa the supplier development partner on your project, and you're going to give me 80 million rand. And he says, well, that's ridiculous. That's not nearly the budget for the supplier development partner. He says, don't worry, I'm going to make sure you get the project and that we, as the SD partner, get it, and we are going to have it inflated to 350 million rand. And he says, but that's ludicrous. I've seen the budget for this entire thing. The budget is 1 billion rand for the entire project. He says, don't worry, this is Saleem Essa, we're going to inflate the budget to 2 billion rand, as long as you make me your SD partner. And then he says, no, you're speaking rubbish, you don't know what you're talking about. So this is where the name dropping comes in, as a show of force, just potentially how important it's the Guptas by extension, were in this whole process. Listen in.
For instance, he told me that they have already decided who's going to be the next CEO of Eskom. And I will clearly see it when it happens, that what the power is that they have and how they make decisions, if I don't believe him.
And who did he say that person would be?
He said they decided Mr. Brian Molefe will be the CEO of Eskom.
Hardly ever a dull day at the state capture inquiry, right? We're going to leave it right there, Michael Appel. Still